This presentation is sponsored by 21st Century Fox, Visa. Additional support is provided by 559 Labs.
Hi, everyone. There's not many people in the room, but okay. The CEO stands for Chief Eating Officer. So anyway, before we get into business, I want to do some introduction so you guys know who this is, besides being a bald guy. Okay. For most of you who are looking at me, you probably think I'm George Clooney, right? To my team, I'm this guy. This guy is very interesting. Anybody knows him? Show of hands. Ah, great. So he's an evil genius. I'm not an evil genius, but I'm a product of corporate America. And in the 90s, I climbed the corporate ladder to become the youngest executive in one of the Fortune 500s and grew up to run business to about $23 billion and decided to retire in '99. That retirement lasted 3 months, and since then, I've built 16 companies, and 8 of them have sold, and they're technology companies that most of you use every day. And to prove it to me, my team just says, look at this. It's just a matter of proof. But what's wrong with this guy? There's really nothing wrong with this guy. He, just like the corporate officers, we focused on driving the bottom line. Actually, my compensation, just like many of you, was driven by how do I maximize the bottom line and create as much profitability. And that's how I got my options to vest and to get more money. And we all are driven by that. We have to maximize shareholder value. So just like this guy, while I was growing a business or growing multiple businesses, I became a single dad and I was raising 3 kids. And my love story of taking these 3 kids was very coincidental because I was focused on really building businesses, making as much money, and didn't think about sustainability, didn't think about anything else because, again, I was not driven to do so. But 6 years ago, I was invited to sit on the board of a food pantry. Anybody been to a food pantry? Okay. What was surprising about this food pantry is it was in Plano, Texas, where I was living at the time. And Plano, if you Google it, is one of the top 10 richest cities in the US. And this lady that's on the screen invited me to be on her board through a CEO of another company who invited me to a fake lunch, in a private restaurant. And all I thought was, why does she want me on her board? I don't know anything about philanthropy. I don't know anything about, besides writing checks from time to time, I don't know anything about the nonprofit world. I don't know anything about hunger. So I thought she wanted me to write a check. So I thought, let me test this. May I bring my kids to volunteer, I said. And she said, of course. So on a Saturday morning, I took my oldest by the ear, and I said, we're going to volunteer. And while my kids, were volunteering, I'm expecting people to come into the pantry. And like a guy who's traveled to over 120 countries and seen hunger, this is what I expected. So in Plano, Texas, which was absolutely unbelievable, I expected to see these types of people, or these, or even these in North America. By the way, homelessness in the US is quite large, but it's actually a very small fraction of hunger. So what I saw that morning gave me chills, and the chills were in the form of a story of somebody named David. By the way, as I was standing at 8:15 before the doors opened, I saw people parking nice cars. I saw people who were dressed better than I was that morning, and I really stood like this. Come on, these guys are cheating the system. These guys are not hungry. And the lady who you saw, Cheryl, said, keep watching. As the doors opened, none of these people looked me straight in the eyes. They passed by me and looked down on the ground. And as a guy who's been around, I said, okay, it's shame. Why are they ashamed? And I asked for permission to interview. And one of the guys I spoke to that was very, very touching to me was David. This story happened in late 2011, and David had, in 2008, been a mortgage officer, so he gave loans, and he lost his job 2 months after buying his first home. He was a single dad, which hit me, again, straight in the chest. And when I talked to him, David couldn't get a job, had just bought the home, and he had to either foreclose on it or find a way to make money. And he remembered that when he was a kid, he worked for his dad in building upholstery for cars. So he decided to build an upholstery shop in his garage. And David was at the food pantry with his son, who was 10 years old at the time, and he had not eaten for 3 days. When I spoke to the son said, I had to give my dad the last ramen noodle soup today because he had not eaten. And I was like, okay, this is absolutely not right. So I wanted to solve this problem. So I started digging into, does hunger really exist in the US? Because it's something that we don't talk about. And by the way, in Canada, it's the same numbers. I found out that this number, by the way, fluctuates between 46 to 50 million hungry Americans. The number is 1 in 6. And about 15 million of those are hungry children. As an immigrant to a country that gave me the opportunity to build businesses, I just couldn't understand how that is possible. So I had to come up with an idea. How do I solve hunger? Has anybody tried to solve hunger in this room? I think it makes any of us just so small. So the idea was, nonprofits cannot solve it. So there's 220 food banks in the US, massive food banks, and thousands of food pantries that could not solve the problem. How do we solve this problem? So I needed to build a for-profit business for many reasons about why nonprofits do not scale. There's a TED Talk on that subject. I think you can probably find it. But I wanted to find a business problem that I could solve and then create a self-sustaining machine to create profitability that creates funding for these businesses or for these problems. So here's what I found. In the US, we eat 1.1 billion meals in restaurants every week. It's a massive number. Last year alone, we spent $799 billion in US restaurants, and yet the failure rate is at 60% within 3 years, and that's a national average. By the way, for people in New York, that's in year 1. And the biggest reason for failure, the biggest reason, is the empty seat. The cost model in a restaurant is about 70% fixed. So if I cannot generate enough traffic into my restaurant to sell them food, effectively I'm still paying the lease, the equipment, the utilities, the cooks, and I need to generate more traffic to sell people food so I can make money. And hence, there's a huge failure rate. So with that, the entrepreneur in me, which knows how to solve problems, thought, what if we can help restaurants fill their empty seats and at the same time feed a person in need locally? How simple of an idea. So here's what we did. Because everything had an app, we decided to build an app that feeds a person in need every time you dine in a restaurant. When you eat, a hungry person also eats. And the math was so simple that, in my mind, with over 1 billion meals in restaurants every week and 50 million hungry Americans, we can, for the first time, solve this problem. And that was really the simplicity of this concept. So again, as I said, there's an app. The app shows you what restaurants are around you that are participating. It counts how many people you fed, and it creates a social impact where you can change people's lives and you share it, and people want to be very visible on that online. So, and this is where I get Trumpish. So I created multiple wins. It's going to be the biggest wins. You're going to be bored of winning. So, in reality, this model creates multiple wins. Everybody that participates in the model wins what they want. So for the restaurant, what we do is we create traffic when they need it most. So we bring them people when they need them. For the consumer, we give them a social impact and a cause-driven concept that every time they eat, they know they're feeding somebody in need without coming out of pocket. At the same time, some of the restaurants use incentives to bring them in. So from time to time, you get a buy one, get one. You get 20% off, or whatever the restaurant wants to do. At the same time, TangoTab becomes a for-profit machine that grows a lot of profit, and hunger could be solved. With that in mind, what we found, and this is tremendous from a business perspective, is when somebody like Uber pays $55 to acquire a consumer and $130 for Airbnb, for TangoTab, our consumer acquisition cost is sub $1. So for the marketing people in the room, doing good is absolutely amazing from a business perspective. And although I've built multiple businesses, I had no clue this is going to happen. So don't think of it as kind of an afterthought. This is something that has to be core to the business. So beyond that, what we've done is we've built a machine. From the simplicity of the model, we started looking at data. I've heard a lot of discussions today about data in different sessions. And what we've done is we collect so much consumer and restaurant data that now I can predict what's going to happen in a restaurant better than a restaurant owner who's been doing it for 20 years. So I can tell him that on a sunny Tuesday in New York between 5 and 6 on Tuesday, he's going to have this many people in the restaurant. His chicken sales are going to be 20% higher than his beef sales. And if he wants to reach 1,000 women within 5 miles and give them a free glass of wine, they can. And just pay me whatever, 10 cents, 50 cents, $1, $2 per head. So it's 100% guaranteed marketing, 100% guaranteed ROI. So effectively, one more win. Now, how does this become a movement? How does this become something that the consumers start driving each other? Somebody asked me yesterday, how much do you spend on advertising? And the answer was 0. And the answer is 0 because every person that downloads this app and uses it will share it with 3 others. And that's how we've been growing the business. And that's such a powerful thing when you're thinking about it from a marketing perspective. Again, not knowing it in the beginning, but now we understand the science behind it. So imagine this. Everybody's wearing orange. And by the way, orange is the color of hunger. That's why we chose the color orange for the brand. And there's 3,500 people here breaking a Guinness record for the largest number of people making sandwiches at the same time. How silly is that? Okay? But these people talked about this for the next year because everybody who participated got a Guinness certificate, and now they spread the message. And because of that, they come to us again and again and ask us to do more. So we've launched a product called Feed the City. It has nothing to do with the business model, but it gets the community engaged, and the community wants to be engaged. We started with 1 event. We have now over 24 events around the country. And look at this. Every weekend, somewhere around the country, there's an event going with hundreds of people showing up, families, race, color, it doesn't matter, from grandparents to young kids who draw mustard smiley faces on the sandwiches and make an impact in their community. You can see many examples from around the country. Beyond that, one of the things that we've learned is that by giving food to people through food banks, it will never solve the problem. We just become a funding mechanism that funds the same mechanisms that were in existence. So we started a concept by deploying the money we generate into farming, into developing logistics solutions for moving food that grows around the country to people who need it. And in many cases, what we're doing is we're investing in local farms in food deserts and putting veterans to work, veterans that are coming back with PTSD. We're putting them to work with other farmers, giving them a skill, teaching them how to fish rather than just giving them fish. And we're producing food and taking 30% of it and giving it to people in need locally. So these events are starting to grow, and it's all because people are interested in promoting good. So if you take that into consideration and build it into the business, I think it'll go much faster and much bigger than just spending dollars on marketing. The business has grown around the country now, and we are operating in the US in 335 cities, in Canada around the southern border, or just north of the border. And we just deployed in Greece and in France as a test to see how it goes around the European market, and we're in the middle of discussions with 14 Asian countries to deploy in Asia. So here's where I do the shameless plug. I would love to get everybody in this room to take their phone out, whether now or later, and download the app. And everybody that downloads it, we'll donate 2 more meals to somebody in need. Okay? So with a few hundred people in the room, I think just by the end of tomorrow, we could feed about 5,000 people. So take your phone out and do it. Anyway, imagine if every company in this room, every company that's represented in this room, would build something like this into their product, would build something like social consumerism into something that you do. So it's not just lip service, it's really building into every transaction, and effectively, we can change the world. So what I'd love to leave you with is to think about this. What story would your company write? Because this is the most important thing at the end of it. Thank you.
Visit sustainablebrands.com for more talks, news, and research to help you redesign the good life.